So we'll move on with the class, and we're talking about the principles of discovery. Just to review briefly, the first principle is to find anchors. Find something, find the things that you know with pretty much certainty that are true and use them as anchors. And everything that you incorporate your life in your learning should agree with these anchors. If they don't agree, then you need to really question it and find out why it may have some error incorporated. And a lot of people just don't do enough sifting where uh, they read a new book and everything in there sounds kind of uh, good, so they just swallow it all. You know? But we need to use our discernment. So, and what helps is these anchors. If you know for sure the sun's going to come up in the morning, it's possible it won't, but there's 99.999% surety the sun is going to rise in the east. And so that's an anchor. And anybody that tells you different, then they are suspect as being in error. Okay. So find as many anchors as you can. And when you absorb new learning, try to keep it in harmony with those anchors. Okay, the second principle is be willing to let your beliefs be either altered or dropped when evidence is presented they're incorrect. And we went through how people crystallize and everything. But we left off with this, is that our core beliefs are like a computer program, which we try to keep rather than writing a new program. And this is one of the problems that computer programmers have. If they create a program and if it's got a major flaw, and if it'd be best just to trash it and just start with a new, better foundation, programmer is very reluctant to do that because he's got so much time invested. So what he's more likely to do is just patch up the old program, and it may not work as good as starting from the foundation up, but sure, he sure saves a lot of time because he got a lot of time invested in it. And we are like that with our belief systems, which are programmed into us, is we, each one of us has spent a whole lifetime getting where we are right now. And if something comes along that tells us, hey, look, your foundation belief, one of your foundation beliefs is in error, and you need to go back and redo your whole belief system from the foundation upward. We don't want to let that go because we have a lifetime invested in our belief system. And so we as disciples, no matter where you are on the path, you're very reluctant to go back and reprogram yourself. So you're much more likely to just throw in a patch. That matter of fact, that's what they call it in a computer program. They call it a patch. When the computer program has some type of flaw, they will send you a patch to correct it, and then you put the patch in, and sometimes worse than it ever was. But sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But sometimes the whole program needs to be looked at clear from the foundation, correct the problems in the foundation upward. And this is what we are all very reluctant to do. But one of the things that disciple needs to realize is this, is when you find out you've been going along the path and you found out you were going the wrong direction, you tend to think of it, well, I've got so much time invested in this direction, I really don't want to turn around and correct myself, because that's like saying I've wasted all this time. But he must not look at it as a waste, because when you have discovered what doesn't work, you've actually made a great discovery. And that is a point of progress along the path, as long as you will admit that. If you admit, say, look, I have uh, progressed along this path, say, like a number of us were raised in an Orthodox church, and you put a whole bunch of time in there, and maybe we even given substantial financial donations, and you have a lot invested, and you're very reluctant to leave. And when it's outdone its usefulness. And so people are very reluctant to leave. Like I know I was raised in the Mormon church, and I've encountered a number of people that have seen the flaws there, and they've tried to move on, and but then they move back because they just uh, can't let it go because of the tremendous investment they have there. Once you have a big investment in something, it's hard to let that investment go. But this is a sign of the true disciple, is when the time comes, doesn't matter what investment you uh, you have to let it go. Matter of fact, one of the greatest initiations of liberation is called the fourth initiation, which is a crucifixion one. And that's the one where you have to let everything go. When you reach the point where you can just let everything go for a higher purpose, then you're a candidate for the fourth initiation. And this was initiation that Jesus passed when he submitted to the crucifixion. And the Christ in him uh, was actually undergoing a higher initiation, the sixth, which is called the initiation of decision. But for Jesus, the entity that uh, had priority over the body, he was undergoing the fourth, where he had to let everything go, where he had an investment in the world. And when you let everything go, it produces a sense of freedom. And a person doesn't really achieve this in one big flying leap, but uh, we learn lessons as we go, letting little things go and then bigger things go. But we do have to reach that point where we uh, can see a value when you've taken the wrong path. Just like if you uh, take a um, take the wrong turn off on the highway, and you're headed the wrong direction. In that case, you know there's continuing in the wrong direction will not get you where you're going. You know for absolute certainty. So in that case, you will actually turn back. It's not a complete waste of time because you found out which one was the wrong road. But we need to be able to do this in our lives also. So there's questions that we can ask ourselves to see uh, what we have let go in our lives, like say our religion we grew up with. Did we think it was correct, and did we let things in it go? And how about your concept of God? When you're young, did you have a certain concept, and now maybe it's different because you let the old concept go and let it be replaced by something more enlightened? And how about politics? When you were young, did you think different politically? And now maybe you see things in a more common sense way? Or how about life after death? When you're younger, did you think a certain way about it and now you think a little bit different? Did you let some of your concepts go? Maybe you thought uh, half the population was going to be burning in hell, and now maybe you think, well, what kind of God would let that happen? And then, what kind of person would you want for a mate in life? When you're young, I know with me, when I was young, uh, I had a vision much different than what I have today. Of course, you want a nice, loving person. Everybody wants that. But certain qualities that you look for when you're young may be a lot different when you uh, get older. And not only a mate, but your friends, associates. Uh, Many things change as you move along because you let certain beliefs go and allow better beliefs and better concepts in your mind to guide you. Okay, any comments or questions on that principle before we move on to the next one? Principle number 3, those things accepted as true should be in harmony with logic, reason, and common sense. Now, this statement may seem quite evident, but belief systems of many have gapping holes in them. Now, everybody thinks, well, scientists are really smart, and when scientists say something is true, well, then if you're logical, you just accept it. But scientists themselves have the same flaws as everybody else. Um, for instance, they think that DNA just kind of made itself. Boy, just think of how small just one cell in your body is. It's so small that there's, I believe, about 30 trillion cells just in your one body. And one of those 30 trillion cells has DNA in it, which is more complicated than the most complex computer on the planet. And to think that it just materialized with no intelligence involved isn't very bright thinking, in my opinion. Um, it's obvious that some intelligence was involved in creating life because life is extremely complicated. Just think of how difficult it is to create some artificial intelligence or just to create the first iPhone or the first computer chip. Uh, but we still are a long way from creating artificial intelligence that could come close to fooling us to thinking it is real intelligence. Yet it's taken billions of people, thousands, perhaps millions of years of intelligent endeavor to get where we are right now. And to think that just DNA or a cell itself, which is even more complicated, just evolved with no intelligence involved is just boggles the mind. I often think that when these atheist scientists die and go to the next world and get an understanding of how things were really created, they'll probably slap themselves in the face and think, boy, was I stupid to not see that. How could I have not seen that? But what's interesting is all the really great scientists and innovators believed in higher intelligence. Einstein did, Edison did, they weren't typical church members, but they believed in divine intelligence. Uh, Tesla did. Tesla said he got a lot of his ideas by reading the Bible and contemplating the scriptures. And Newton said the same thing. Newton said he was often contemplating scripture when he got some of the scientific ideas. And but the really great scientists and innovators in thought, just about all of them believed in a superior divine intelligence that was above just regular human thinking, that things just didn't occur by accident. But where are these scientists today? The scientists we see on TV, most of them are atheists, and most of them haven't really accomplished anything outside of repeating what they have learned in their textbooks. So just because somebody says the science says this doesn't mean it's 100% true. We have to realize that no matter what position a person is in, that emotion has a big influence, often a bigger influence than mind. Okay. Another thing, so for even scientists, we have to apply this third rule. Look at what even the scientists are saying and said, and we need to say it needs to be in harmony with logic, reason, and common sense. Now, also another group is believers in standard religion. Heaven and hell is something that the common belief in it and is just not logical. Jesus said that God will treat us with more love and goodness than we will treat our own children. But what parent would send a child to burn in hell for all eternity? It's just not logical. If God treats his kids better than we treat ours, what parent would send his kid to hell? No matter how big a mistakes your own children make, you have sympathy for them. You understand them. You understand your children like you don't quite a bit more than you'd understand other people's children. Other people's children, if they rob a bank, you think, well, send them to jail. Okay. Your kid robs a bank, you may think, well, I understand. You understand your kid, even with his flaws, even when he does stuff that's wrong. You are very sympathetic because he's your kid and you understand him. And so to think that God understands us and the higher lives understand us, what they want to do is they want to help us. They don't want to send us to hell. They want to help us. The hells that we endure, we send ourselves to. And we are our own judges, our own convictors, not some higher power, but we ourselves are responsible for any state that we are in that is not peaceful and that is not heaven. Okay, any comment on that before we move on there?
JJ, I really appreciate that comment. And if I can take it just one slightly the same thing, that we understand our children even better than our children understand themselves, because we know what happened when they were in the womb. If my children are adopted and they come from troubled past, their mothers did things while they were pregnant that, that I do know about. And then I know, like, I know the problems they had with their feeding, and I know the problems they had with their father, and I know the turmoil during this stage, stuff that they've blocked or don't know about, so that when, let's say, my 8-year-old is like deathly afraid of the dark, like so fearful of the dark, we have every light on. I'm not yelling at her. I know her, and I understand where her fear is coming from, and I have a great compassion for her. She doesn't know where her fear is coming from, but I do, because I know what's happened in this house when she was young. So we just turn every light on. And then she wears an eye mask, right? So yeah, I've never thought of it really like that. Like, I knew about her when she was in someone else. Like, that's just beautiful. Like, I get it. Like, we know, I love them so much that I have compassion when people say I should be punishing. And I
Right,
can't.
right,
I can't punish them because I
right.
know their pain, right? Why would I send them to hell? That's so dumb.
Yeah, and
That makes no sense.
God knows you even better than you know your kids.
Right. No, exactly. And if I can, in my human sense, say, wow, this is all the stuff I know about my children, and I could never, like, there are consequences for certain things. Don't get me wrong. But these bigger things, like, how can you let her say that to you? I'm like, well, this just happened 3 hours ago with her dad that you don't know about. That's why I'm thinking in my head, you can't judge me and you can't judge my child because you don't know. So that's how God feels about us. Why would he just, right? I get it. I'm processing. So I love that. Thank you for that parallel, because I do relate to my children in a different way. Like, God can relate to us in a very special way.
Right.
So thank you.
It's a very
Powerful.
it's a very simple
Yeah.
belief, but it's an important
Yeah.
one to just
Yeah.
realize that God is good.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
higher lives are good. They have they want to help us. They don't want to punish us. They want to help. And uh, it's our belief systems that produce the obstacles and the hells that we might experience. Okay, another thing is that needs to be submitted to in harmony with logic is what people believe in the written word, and the scriptures is the interesting one, because the typical religious person, whether it be Christian or Islam or even Buddhist, will see the written word as black and white, as if it's written by the finger of God itself, and is not to be questioned. Okay. Um, but if the written word is not in harmony with uh, logic, then it needs to be questioned. Either it's wrong or you're not interpreting it correctly. Now, the true believer will always go with, well, I must not be interpreting it correctly then. He'll never think anything in the scriptures could be wrong, but some things could be. One interesting thing is it talks about uh, the the book of Genesis makes it sound like there's a dome over the earth when it was created. And so these flat earth people, they believe the earth is flat because uh, the scripture says certain things, that says there's four corners to the earth, and they believe there's actual four corners. And then there's a firmament above the heaven, and they think this is like a dome. And then they think the stars are just little points of light in that dome. And they really believe that. It's amazing that this flat earth doctrine has got a revival. It used to be when I was young, there was hardly anybody believed the earth was flat. But I read a survey that said about 25% of the people are not sure the earth isn't flat.
Well, if you can't trust the media, how do we even know?
Yeah. There was this one flat earth guy, he was building his own rocket. He thinks that NASA and everybody are just fabricating everything. So he was building his own rocket to send himself up. He thought he was going to go up to where the dome is and prove to the world that the Earth was flat. And he was going to go up there and take a picture. And he shot himself up in a rocket and died. So he was never able to accomplish his goal.
It reminds me of the movie called A Truman Show, when there actually was a dome over this
Yeah,
town.
that's the way the flat earthers think. I think it's kind of like that.
It's actually, it's like a 50-cent piece, but you have to get on the edge to see it.
Yeah.
AJ, that's a very charitable interpretation of what happened. He died. He committed suicide. You know, we know what's really going on there. They didn't want the truth.
Right. Who knows, huh? Okay, another one is the idea that the Earth is less than 10,000 years old. It's amazing how they explain how you say, well, you're out of harmony in science. You know, light travels 186,000 miles per second, and there are objects that are 13 billion light years away from the Earth. So how did light in 10,000 years travel 13 billion light years? Does anyone know the explanation they give for that?
It's a trick by Satan.
No, they say that when the universe was first created, the light moved a lot faster. That God created the universe and just light just moved instantly everywhere. And
Well, that's what we humans do. We always rationalize it, try to change the facts to show that our beliefs are correct.
yeah. And so what they maintain is light is slowing down. They say it's still slowing down. Matter of fact, the first guy who measured it, the first people who measured it, it was going a little faster than it is now. But the scientists tell us it's because they didn't measure it entirely accurate. But the difference was very small. But since they've been able to measure light accurately, it hasn't slowed down at all. So there's no scientific evidence that that's correct. But what they'll do is they'll look at their belief system and they will contort what science is in their mind to agree with their belief system. So according to their belief system, there's no way light could travel from 1 billion light years away to here, that it would take 1 billion years because the universe was created less than 10,000 years ago. So they have to come up with an alternative explanation. And these guys are not short on that. They have alternative explanations for everything. But
speed of light is slowed down by the amount of BS that it has to pass through.
yeah, right. So the question we need to ask ourselves, if we applied this principle in our lives, have you found some flaws in logic, reasoning, and common sense in your own life? And did questioning lead you to greater light and knowledge? Yeah, let's pick on Robin and Dave. Can you think of how you had some belief when you were younger that now you look back, it doesn't make a lot of sense?
Yeah, I used to believe I was smart.
Well, that's not illogical.
Every year I get older, I realize I wasn't as smart as I thought I was.
That reminds me of the statement that the kid says, when I was young, I thought my dad was stupid, but now he's got a lot smarter as I got older.
I used to believe I was invincible. I would never get old and sore. Yeah.
Yeah, I read a statement when I was in college that said, no young man believes that he will ever die. And you know, that's the way young people think. They think that they live their lives as if they're going to live forever. On. It's probably a good thing they do that because who wants to think about dying when you're young and having fun? But okay. So the other question is, do we still hold beliefs that are not logical? Are we prepared to examine them in the light of truth? This is what we must always ask ourselves. Because, you know, the fact that we are still here means that we are still caught in a number of illusions. Okay. When we dispel all the illusions, we don't even have to be here anymore. We can go on to higher spheres. But because we are here, it means that we have illusions to dispel. And even the masters still have illusions to dispel. Every life has illusions to dispel until they go back to their source. And life is like a game kind of, because it's in a game you find the next clues, and then those clues lead you to more clues. And so no matter how smart we think we are, we periodically come across things that turn on a light and we think, well, how come I didn't understand this before? It's so obvious now. But it wasn't obvious before. But how about you, Ken? Have you had that happen in your life? You see some things that are true and you think, how come I didn't see that earlier? Oh, can't hear you. You don't have your audio on, Ken.
Yeah, a lot of things. The older I get, the more I see.
Yeah, yeah, I tell you, life is a learning process. Okay, we'll go on to principle 4. Principle 4 is to seek out true sources of knowledge, study and incorporate them into your life. Knowledge dispels error and illusion. This kind of somewhat expands on the first principle of finding these anchors. But one important anchor is finding sources of knowledge that can, that you feel, that you sense, that your reason and everything in you tells you they're pretty accurate. Now, nothing written is infallible. Um, an anchor, a source of knowledge for religious people, for instance, is their scriptures. And they feel their scriptures has value. And whether you believe in the scriptures or not, all scriptures of the world have a certain amount of value. Now, the interesting thing about scripture is when you see it as having value, and then you reflect on the words, even if the words maybe are not that great, reflecting on them will sometimes produce an insight even beyond the enlightenment that's in the words themselves. When I was young, I memorized quite a few scriptures, and sometimes I'd just be driving down the road in the car. Maybe that one of the scriptures comes back into my mind, and I think it over, and it brings additional light. Same thing, maybe people can do this with Shakespeare even. A lot of people have memorized lines from Shakespeare. And then when you're going through life, maybe one of these lines come back to you and will stimulate the turning on of a light. So it's good to have some basic writings that you see as your highest source of light. Like I say, for some it's the scriptures, for me, the highest writings I think are on the planet are the ones given from DK to Alice A. Bailey. I think are the highest that I have found, but they're still not infallible. Every once in a while I read something in there that I think, well, I'm not sure if I agree with this, but I give it weight. You give it weight because I I give this as an earned authority. There's enough things in here in the writings that are true that if it says something that doesn't sound quite right, I'll still think, well, maybe I'm not seeing it right. Maybe I need to look at it in a different way. When I first read about in DK's writings about the overshadowing of Jesus, it went completely against what I was taught in my religion. And so I had a hard time accepting that, but I thought, well, he's been right on so much. Maybe I ought to really consider this. And as I thought about it, I began to see evidence after evidence that he was correct. And finally, I received a spiritual confirmation and found out for sure that he was correct on that. And so, if you once you find a teacher, a writing, a book, a series of books that you feel are solid, then spend a lot of time with them. There's a lot of books out there, but and a lot of them have a lot of frivolous stuff in. A lot of them have a lot of truth and error. So if you have a choice between spending time with something that's say 60% true versus something that you think is 95% true, it's a wise use of time to spend a lot more time with that source that you feel is close to 100%, because that'll take you a lot farther. And when you find a really good source, it's a good idea to read it over a number of times. I don't read anything over more than once unless it really grabs me as being having some inspiration behind it. Then if it's really good, like the writings of Alice A. Bailey, I think I read 4 or 5 times and I've even memorized some of it. But so I paid a lot of attention to that. The scriptures I read quite a number of times when I was younger also, because I gave a lot of weight to that. And so the things you give a lot of weight to, spend a little time with. And because you don't, an inspired work, work with a lot of thought behind it, you don't pick it all up the first reading. And it's amazing what you will pick up as you go through it a second, third, or even a fourth time. So that's a good rule of thumb to follow. Now, oh yeah,
Oh,
go ahead, Rick.
it occurred to me that when you're doing, if you're a draftsman, you're putting ideas on paper, you always have a start point, which is called 0, 0, 0. When you get into 4th dimensional thinking, basically you can put 0, 0, 0 any place you want, and then revolve or move away from or closer to the so your anchor, your biggest anchor is always, where's 0? Where do we start? What's the beginning?
Yeah, 0 is right in between the infinite number of positive numbers and the infinite number of negative numbers. So one of the thoughts out there is there's a whole universe in the 0 point. Okay. An important point is here is once teachings are found that you think are true, the important thing to do is to apply them. If once they're applied, then you find out, you come to what you might call a realization. Accepting truth as in theory is different than accepting truth because you've applied it. And Jesus made this statement about himself, or about his teachings, when his teachings were questioned. And he says, if any man will do his will, he shall know of the doctrine, whether it be of God or whether I speak of myself. So in other words, he was saying, yeah, you know, some of these things I'm teaching sound kind of strange to you, but if you apply them, you will find out whether or not they are true. So if you're not sure if something is true, and if it's something you can apply it in your life, and then see how it registers with your own soul. If
That's what it says in all the beginning of all the Alice Bailey books.
Yeah, right. Tells us to go by our own intuition. It says that if these writings, he says, bring a flashing forth of the intuition, then follow them. He says if it doesn't happen, then disregard it. So even the Tibetan doesn't claim to be infallible. He tells us to go by that flashing forth. And I always like that word, flashing forth, because I've identified with that, because it's happened to me a number of times in my life. You just are contemplating something, and all of a sudden it's like a flash comes and you come to a realization. Have you had that happen to you yet, that flashing forth? Can you identify with that?
Yes, when you become aware of the true meaning.
Yeah. How about you, Adam? Have you had the flashing forth?
Wow.
Didn't
I,
mean to put you on the spot there.
interrupt.
I know when you had the flashing forth is when you realized that Marnie was the one for you.
There you go. Good answer. Revelatory wise, I don't know, but certainly had confirmation of things.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, that's what brings it, is the contemplating. You absorb things, you contemplate, and then you get like an inner confirmation. It's not always like a bolt of lightning or anything, but it's sometimes very subtle, where you just feel that subtle confirmation. And I suspect it's more that way with you than like a lightning flash. But but
I remember, the thing I remember was experiencing peace, the peace that passeth all. That was the most probably dramatic experience I had when I was reading certain texts.
yeah, that's good, because if you've experienced that peace, that is something that's pretty much undeniable. That you feel that you know you're headed at least the right direction.
Yeah, it lasted for several months.
Several months, huh? That's good.
Yeah.
That's yeah. Usually when that happens, it's more like 3 days, but for several months, that's pretty good.
Yeah, I'm ready to commit suicide because I can't get it back.
But yeah, the key is to have peace all the time, but there will be, everything goes in cycles. You'll have certain cycles where you have a spiritual high, and if you stay focused on the light, you'll stay pretty much, you'll never reach a really bad place again, but you'll always have waves and cycles of spiritual vibration, and whether it be peace or kind of an inner joy, or whatever it is. These things kind of come and go in cycles. And then sometimes maybe higher intelligence will pay attention to you and throw something your direction. You never know. Okay, we'll wrap it up on that principle for the week. Any comments or questions on that before we close? Seek out true sources of knowledge, study and incorporate them into your life. Knowledge dispels error and illusion. So you, no matter, even when you have that flashing forth, as you move forward, you will see from a higher angle, but still may not see perfectly. But the key is to take a step up, to see from a higher angle, so you're seeing truth from a clear vision than you were before. And that's the thing. If we saw it 100% with clarity, we wouldn't even have to be here. But because we are here, it means we still have more things to see, more things to understand. And
It's like the old saying, we see through the looking glass darkly.
exactly.
And another thing about your original thought about anchors. I think we need to look at the opposite and turn that around, and how can we, in our service to humanity, intuitively know the anchors of those to whom we seek to serve? What key can we find into their receptivity by the anchors that they hold true?
Yeah, well, this one thing I've found is that in talking to different people of different belief systems, you have to speak their language. Like I've been spending some time on the Course in Miracles study group, and I have to speak their language. If I speak to them the way I do to esoteric students like Ed, they would totally reject me. But I have to speak the Course in Miracles language when I'm on that site. And this is the way it is with everybody has a little bit different language about them that you have to understand when you're speaking to them. Because, and this is a mistake a lot of people make, is that, well, Mormons make this very often. Mormons will often quote Mormon scriptures to a regular Christian, and that means nothing to them because they don't believe in the Mormon scriptures. So it doesn't do any good for a Mormon to quote Mormon scriptures to a non-Mormon. Doesn't do any good for a regular Christian to quote the Bible to an atheist scientist. And you have to speak their language. If you want to speak to an atheist scientist, then you need to speak science to them. And so we need to find in all of our communications what, like Ed says, what other people consider to be their anchors and their language, and speak accordingly. So that's a good thing to know, because communication is really a key to making a successful life. Okay, any other comments or questions?
I think it's important that we develop our intuition so that we can look into the lives of people and find how best we can serve them.
Yeah, you got to go beyond the world of appearances to the subtle world to get a feel of what your next step is and how to approach. Okay, any other comments? Well, you've been a good group today, good vibes, and we will look forward to seeing you next Sunday at 2 p.m. All being well.
Take care. Bye, everyone.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, JJ.